Okay, let's just jump right in. Have you ever stopped to really think about how weird humanity is? In a good way, I mean.
Oh, weird how?
Well, we are the only animal species, the only one that actually thrives pretty much everywhere on Earth.
Oh, right. Yeah,
Seriously, think about it. The coldest tundras, the hottest deserts, we figure out how to live there. That's that's pretty profound, isn't it?
it absolutely is. I mean, no other creature comes close to that global spread. And, what's really grabbed researchers for years is this kind of paradox around it.
A paradox.
Yeah. See, our species, Homo sapiens, we evolved in Africa maybe 300,000 years ago.
Mm.
But the first times humans tried migrating out, well, they mostly failed.
Failed how? Like they just didn't make it.
Essentially, yeah. They didn't leave any lasting genetic trace in populations outside Africa today. But then, much later, maybe around 50,000 years ago, there's this huge successful wave of migration. And that's where basically all non-African people today come from.
Okay, so that's the core puzzle then. Why did that migration work when the earlier ones didn't? That's what we're digging into today.
Exactly.
Our mission for this deep dive is to unpack the surprising origin story. We're looking at some fascinating new research that points to this critical 20,000-year window in Africa that acted like a kind of ecological boot camp.
Right. Preparing us for the rest of the world.
Yeah.
And yeah, this deep dive, it's leaning heavily on some really significant new work, primarily a study that just came out in Nature.
Okay.
It involved a big team, researchers like Dr. Emily Hallett from Loyola in Chicago, Dr. Michela Leonardi at London's Natural History Museum, Professor Andrea Manica from Cambridge, Professor Eleanor Scerri at Max Planck. A whole group really shedding light on this.
Got it. So this paradox, let's set the scene a bit more. Homo sapiens, Africa, 300,000 years ago. And you're saying they didn't just, hang around. They tried leaving earlier.
Oh, yeah, definitely. We have fossil evidence showing these earlier attempts, maybe around 125,000 years ago, perhaps when things got a bit wetter, creating these green corridors across otherwise dry areas.
Green corridors. Interesting.
And there's even some evidence suggesting humans were in West African rainforest maybe 150,000 years ago. So they were exploring, moving around.
But crucially, those earlier groups, they vanished, genetically speaking.
That's the key point. They didn't last outside Africa. No descendants today from those specific migrations. It's like trial runs that just didn't stick.
So the big question the researchers were asking, as Dr. Hallett put it, was, what was different? Why were humans ready this time?
Exactly. What changed?
And I gather some older ideas maybe suggested, I don't know, a single invention, like a super weapon or a new way to chat that suddenly made the difference.
Right. Those ideas were out there. But, the evidence doesn't really back that up. The authors of this study point out that complex tools, even symbolic stuff, those things show up in the archaeological record much, much earlier.
So it wasn't one magic bullet.
Doesn't seem like it. And that leads us right to the core finding of this new Nature study.
Okay.
It suggests that ancient humans spent a long time, roughly 20,000 years, between about 70,000 and 50,000 years ago, basically, learning, mastering how to survive in Africa's toughest spots before they went global.
20,000 years. That's a huge chunk of time, like a massive training montage.
Huh. Yeah, you could call it humanity's great ecological expansion, maybe. An intense period of adaptation right there on the home continent.
So how did Dr. Hallett's team figure this out? What was the evidence?
Well, they did something pretty ambitious. They gathered data from almost 500 archaeological sites across Africa, 479. To be exact, all radiometrically dated.
Okay, wow.
And then they combined that with environmental data for the last 120,000 years. Basically, they wanted to map out precisely where humans were living and how that changed over time, especially compared to the environment.
And I bet the results weren't what people expected.
Pretty surprising, yeah. Instead of just sticking to the grassy savannas we often imagine.
Right, the classic image.
Exactly. Instead of that, starting around 70,000 years ago, humans began spreading out dramatically into all sorts of different and much tougher environments.
Like where, specifically?
Well, into really dense forests in West and Central Africa. Think thick canopies, difficult navigation, places that are genuinely hard to live in.
Okay.
And at the same time, they were pushing into seriously harsh places like the Sahara and the semi-arid Sahel regions up north.
Wow. So not just adapting, but actively moving into challenging zones.
It seems so. Dr. Michela Leonardi, one of the authors, she said, our results showed that the human niche began to expand significantly from 70,000 years ago. and that it was driven by using all these diverse habitats, from forests to arid deserts.
And she called it a sharp change, right? Not gradual.
Exactly. That's what stood out. Not a slow creep, but a real noticeable shift in behavior around that 70,000-year mark.
It makes you think of that quote from Professor Scerri.
Eleanor Scerri, yeah. She asks, "We knew there wasn't a single Garden of Eden, but were there many gardens?"
Right. And this research seems to say, yes, lots of gardens, and some were pretty thorny.
Ah, exactly. These challenging gardens were maybe the key training grounds.
Okay, this is fascinating. So they're expanding into tough places around 70,000 years ago. What was happening with the climate then? Was it getting easier?
Actually, no. That's another key part of the story. That period, from roughly 70,000 down to 50,000 years ago, was climatically really turbulent.
Turbulent how?
We had major global climate events, like something called Heinrich Event 6. This meant generally cooler, drier conditions across large parts of Africa, and lots of rapid shifts, wet periods followed by dry periods, back and forth, pretty unstable.
Huh. So the climate was getting worse in a way, more unpredictable?
In many ways, yes. More challenging, certainly. But here's the crucial insight from the study. This instability didn't just kick people out of Africa right away.
No.
Instead, it might have actually forced them to innovate, to develop new survival tricks within Africa. They had to get creative to cope with these constant changes.
Adversity breeding innovation, essentially.
That seems to be the idea, and we see hints of this in the archaeology from that time.
Like what? What kind of innovations?
Well, things like more widespread use of controlled burning to manage ecosystems.
Wow. That's pretty sophisticated stuff for back then.
It really is. Also, evidence for better water storage techniques, obviously crucial in drier periods, and signs that people were eating a much wider range of foods.
Expanding the menu, not just relying on the usual stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Learning to exploit different resources in different kinds of environments. And the study's modeling showed something else, too.
Yeah.
Humans started increasingly living in areas with bigger swings in annual temperature, and they got better at surviving where vegetation was sparse. Skills that would be, incredibly useful later on.
Absolutely. Skills for living almost anywhere. So Africa itself, with all its diversity, rainforests, deserts, mountains, savannas, it really was like a continental laboratory.
That's a great way to put it, a laboratory, or like you said earlier, a boot camp. It provided the perfect setting to develop this toolkit for survival.
A 20,000-year-long boot camp.
Right. It all ties into this concept of an ecological niche.
Which is basically what an animal can handle, where it can live.
Exactly. What conditions it can cope with, where you find it. And the study showed humans didn't really push into the most extreme niches much before 70,000 years ago. Populations were maybe more isolated before that.
But then came the boot camp.
And everything changed. Professor Scerri calls this resulting ability our superpower. She says, quote, "We are ecosystem generalists."
Ecosystem generalists, I like that.
And she emphasizes that the humans who left Africa after this period, after 60, 50,000 years ago, they were different. They were equipped with a distinctive ecological flexibility.
That flexibility, that's the key differentiator.
It seems to be. It's what lets us, as you said at the start, live almost everywhere. We're the ultimate generalists.
Unlike, say, a polar bear or a camel, which are highly specialized.
Precisely. And importantly, this wasn't just about suddenly having huge populations everywhere. Some of these environments, like deserts, couldn't support that many people.
Right. Low carrying capacity.
Yeah. But what it likely did mean was increased mobility. People moving between different zones, perhaps seasonally, perhaps more permanently, and crucially, more contact between different groups.
Ah, so it wasn't just about surviving tough places, but also about connecting more.
That seems to be part of it. Professor Andrea Manica talks about this as a ramping up of social networks, of movement of ideas, creating, in his words, a more connected species.
So learning from each other, sharing innovations across these different environments?
Plausibly, yeah. And that increased connection, that mixing, might have also helped sort of consolidate what we think of as modern human traits during that window, between maybe 100,000, 50,000 years ago.
Okay, this paints a really compelling picture. They weren't just waiting for an easy opportunity to leave Africa.
Quite the opposite, it seems. What's really striking is that the big successful migration around 50,000 years ago likely happened when climate conditions outside Africa were actually tougher than during some of those earlier failed attempts.
Wow. So they didn't leave because it got easy. They left because they were ready for hard.
They were ready for anything. That hard-won ecological flexibility was the critical difference.
It really turns the old narrative on its head a bit, doesn't it?
It really does.
Hmm.
It suggests that our species' incredible ability to colonize the entire planet, from the Arctic ice to the Amazon jungle, that ability was forged right there in Africa.
Over tens of thousands of years of dealing with its diverse challenges.
Exactly. It wasn't a sudden leap. It was this deep, profound adaptation developed on our home continent. Our global success story started right there.
So bringing it forward, what does this 20,000-year boot camp story mean for us now? Thinking about this ecological flexibility as our superpower.
It's a powerful idea.
Yeah. How does that ancient skill set, being generalists, being adaptable, how does that maybe help us face the challenges we're dealing with today? Climate change, rapid technological shifts, all sorts of new pressures.
It makes you wonder, doesn't it? Perhaps that core adaptability, that ability to learn, innovate, and adjust to new environments, whether they're physical or social or technological, maybe that's the enduring legacy.
Maybe the lesson isn't just that we survived, but how that experience shaped us, hardwired us almost for continuous adaptation. So maybe a final thought for you listening. What are the unexpected new habitats, the new challenges that you're navigating right now? And how could that deep, ancient flexibility be your guide, something to chew on?